humanity is biologically programmed to fear death. We view mortality as the ultimate tragedy, a terrifying full stop at the end of consciousness. Because our existence is so painfully brief, we have historically mythologized immortality as the ultimate cure, the greatest gift a being could possibly receive. When audiences look at the immortal elves of Middle-earth, and specifically at Elrond, the Lord of Rivendell, they see the realization of that fantasy. They see a being of perfect grace, eternal youth, and infinite wisdom, floating serenely above the petty, brutal constraints of time. But clinical psychology and the harsh mathematics of eternity suggest a profoundly different, terrifying reality. If we strip away the romanticized fantasy and examine the condition of immortality through a strictly psychological lens, it ceases to be a divine gift. It becomes a terminal diagnosis. Immortality is not the absence of death. It is the absolute, inescapable guarantee of chronic, compounding grief. Today, we are going to perform a psychological autopsy on Elrond. We are not going to analyze him as a benevolent healer or a wise political leader. We are going to deconstruct the mind of a man who has been held hostage by time for over 6,000 years. We are going to examine the brutal pathology of a mind forced to archive the death of every person it has ever loved, the slow decay of its environment, and the ultimate, agonizing surrender of its own children to the grave. To understand the sheer, crushing weight of Elrond's psychological baseline, we must return to the defining trauma of his genesis, the severing of his twin. Elrond was not born alone. He was born alongside his twin brother, Elros. At the end of the First Age, because of their unique half-elven heritage, the Valar forced the twins to make a permanent, biological choice. Elrond chose to be counted among the immortal elves. Elros chose to be counted among mortal men. In the lore, this is treated as a grand, noble divergence of destinies. In clinical psychology, it is the initiation of a horrific, slow-motion trauma. For the first few decades, they remained identical. But as time progressed, Elrond experienced a psychological horror that is almost impossible for a mortal mind to comprehend. Because they were twins, Elros was Elrond's genetic mirror. Elrond remained perfectly static, frozen in his physical prime. But every time he looked at his brother, he saw his own face wrinkling. He saw his own hair turning gray. He saw his own body becoming frail, succumbing to disease, and slowly breaking down. When Elros finally died of old age, Elrond did not just lose a brother. He became a victim of profound survivor's guilt on a geological scale. He had to live for thousands of years, knowing that his other half was rotting in the earth. Furthermore, Elros founded the kingdom of Númenor. Elrond had to watch his brother's entire bloodline, his nephews, his nieces, their children, and their children's children age, corrupt, and die, generation after generation, in a relentless, mechanical cycle of biological decay. This compounding grief was further accelerated by a devastating marital trauma. To understand Elrond's profound isolation, we must examine the loss of his wife, Celebrian. While traveling over the misty mountains, she was ambushed, captured, and subjected to agonizing physical and psychological torture by orcs. Though Elrond was renowned as the greatest healer in Middle-earth, he encountered the absolute limit of his medical agency. He successfully healed her physical wounds, but he could not cure her severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The psychological damage was so absolute that the environment of Middle-earth itself became a constant, unbearable trigger, forcing her to abandon her family and flee across the sea. Elrond, the ultimate healer, was forced to stand on the shore and watch his wife sail away, entirely powerless against the disintegration of her mind. For Elrond, time was not a river that carried him forward. It was an abrasive erosion that slowly ground away everything he was attached to, while leaving him perfectly, painfully intact. His famous wisdom is not a magical trait. It is simply the heavy, exhausted scar tissue of a mind that has processed thousands of funerals. This chronic, compounding trauma eventually triggers a severe avoidance mechanism. Unable to process the endless cycle of decay in the outside world, Elrond establishes Rivendell. Pop culture has conditioned us to view Rivendell as a magical resort, an idyllic vacation spot for weary travelers. From a clinical perspective, this is a gross misdiagnosis. Rivendell is a palliative care facility. It is a psychological hospice built by a man who can no longer tolerate the concept of change. During the Second and Third Ages, Elrond uses Vilya, the Ring of Air, to artificially manipulate the environment of the valley. He does not use his power to conquer or expand. He uses it to halt entropy. He creates a localized stasis field. Inside Rivendell, nothing decays, nothing changes, and time is forcefully held at bay. This is not the architecture of a healthy, forward-looking society. This is the architecture of severe trauma. Elrond is acting as the head physician of a dying race, maintaining an artificial life support system for a culture that has already expired. Rivendell is a beautiful mausoleum. It is a closed-ward psychological sanctuary where the immortal mind can hide from the terrifying, unpredictable variables of the mortal world. He hoards relics, he hoards memories, and he hoards historical texts, because memory is the only thing time cannot immediately kill. He has entirely given up on the future. He is merely curating the past. But no quarantine is absolute. The tragedy of Elrond is that the very mortality he tried to lock out of his valley eventually infected his own bloodline. This brings us to the terminal psychological blow, the choice of his daughter, Arwen. When Arwen falls in love with the mortal King Aragorn and chooses to forsake her immortality, we are presented with a sweeping romantic narrative. But for Elrond, this is not a romance. It is a clinical diagnosis of terminal parental grief. The most profound, unnatural trauma a human being can experience is outliving their own child. For an immortal, this concept is an apocalyptic psychological violation. By choosing Aragorn, Arwen is not just moving away. She is actively injecting the disease of mortality into her own veins. When Elrond finally gives his blessing and watches his daughter marry the new king of Gondor, he is not participating in a celebration. He is attending an execution. He is standing at the altar, looking at his child, possessing the cold, mathematical certainty that in a mere blink of an elven lifespan, she will wither, she will suffocate under the weight of old age, and she will be buried in the cold dirt. After thousands of years of desperately trying to control his environment, trying to protect his people, and using a ring of power to hold back the tide of death, Elrond is forced to realize that he has zero agency. He could not save his brother. He could not save the mind of his wife. He could not save the great high kings of the past, and he cannot save his own daughter from the grave. The illusion of control is completely shattered. This total systemic collapse reframes the ending of the entire mythology. When the One Ring is destroyed, the power of Elrond's ring, Vilya, evaporates. The life support machine of Rivendell is unplugged. The stasis breaks, and time floods back into the valley. When Elrond finally rides to the Grey Havens to board the white ships and leave Middle-earth forever, he is not marching in a victory parade. He does not look like a conquering hero. He looks like a patient who has been entirely drained of his life force, finally being discharged from a psychiatric facility after a lifelong grueling battle with a disease he could not cure. He is fundamentally, irreversibly exhausted. His archive of trauma has reached absolute maximum capacity. His mind simply cannot physically process another loss. The tragedy of Elrond proves that immortality is not the ultimate victory over death. It is a sentence of solitary confinement within your own deteriorating reality. He leaves Middle-earth because there is nothing left for him to do but remember the dead. His departure to the undying lands of Valinor is not a reward for his wisdom. It is the desperate, final retreat of a mind seeking the only thing that can cure chronic, unending grief: absolute, uninterrupted silence.